Yeah.
Well, a beautiful weekday meant time for another ride. Now, after my customary pose at Starbucks, I decided to head out and meet the boys. Here we had Tim on the KLR650, and joining us today was one of Tim's buddies on another KLR650. And last but not least, Rod on the 990 Adventure. After a quick debate, we decided we'd head back to Vedder and tackle some of the tougher trails. And after a short burn on the pavement, we transitioned onto the dirt roads. Now this is my first ride video with Tim, but as a little bit of a side note, Tim is another rider who's far better than me, for lack of a better word, so I decided to let him take the lead for a while, get some footage. Before long, we arrived at the Up and Over Trail, as it's known. Now this is one of the hard trails that's used in the annual Dual Sport BC ride. If you remember from my last video, we ended up turning back, but I was feeling a little braver today and we decided to tackle it from the other side. So after splashing through a few mud puddles, we made our way towards the ascent section of the trail. Now you may notice in these videos that I am completely unable to decide whether or not I want my visor up and down. I do not run with goggles, so I'm never really at a happy medium. Now as we went along, the further we got, the steeper the trail became. It's hard to really show sometimes how tough this kind of stuff can be when you're on a big bike. It's one thing if you're riding a little 250 two-stroke, but when you're dealing with twice the weight, it takes twice the effort.
Whoa.
Now it was at this point that Rod, in the interest of preserving his beautiful 990, decided to swing the bike around, head down the trail, and meet up with us on the other side. Now I can't really fault him for this decision. His bike is much nicer than mine, and I don't want anyone to think that that reflects poorly on his riding ability, because he rides circles around me most days. Now at this point I pretty much incorrectly assumed that the worst of this trail was over with and it would be all downhill, so to say, from here. But I would prove myself wrong in only a few minutes. Now, there's nothing like wet feet to make you feel like you're really adventure riding.
Note to self, waterproof boots, not in fact waterproof.
Now, the trail became less of a trail and more of a rut at this point, and I kind of just had to stand up, lean back, and let gravity do most of the work. I found that if I relied too heavily on my brakes, they just started to fade, so not really much else to do but hold on and ride it out. At this point you're pretty much committed and you know that you're not going back up, so heading down is the only option you really have. Of course, I always elect to avoid the puddles wherever possible. Now this is the exact section that Rod and I chickened out on last ride, so I figured heading down I was going to make it down one way or the other. And in this case, fortunately, I made it down without scratching the bike up too much, which is always a plus. So we went off to find Rod and see what other trails we could find. After a quick rendezvous with Rod, we were on our way. Now, Tim mentioned that he knew the way to a lookout up a trail that we previously explored in my last video. So we decided to go ahead for round 2.
Take 2!
This time I make it through the bypass clean. And after a quick hill climb, we arrived at the first lookout. Now this is the point where me and Rod had previously stopped, thinking that there wasn't a way around this big mud pit. But Tim figured he knew a way around, so we doubled back and took a look. Almost lost the 950 there. A pulled groin is a small price to pay for not getting a scratch on my scratched crash bars. Tim found the trail, so we queued up and got ready for the climb. Rod seemed to make it up okay, so I figured with enough gas I should be able to make it up clean. Now I actually high-centered the 950 on this rock and ended up having to muscle the bike off the skid plate. I got caught up on the last hill and down the bike goes. It's funny how with enough adrenaline you can pick up a 530-pound bike with relatively little effort. Now this trail took us down a very steep descent. Now I'm breaking the cardinal rule of off-road motorcycling in that you should never descend a hill that you're not confident you can't make back up. But it seemed like a good idea at the time. You know when the visor goes up that I mean business.
Oh boy. Timmy, I certainly hope this doesn't dead end, because I don't know if we're going back up that.
And after Rod bounced his way down the hill, we continued on. The terrain opened up, and Tim figured we weren't too far off from his lookout. Now, it had been a good 10 years or so before he'd been up this way, and he remembered from last time that there was an easy way to head down. But after my previous experience with gates up on Vedder Mountain, I was a little bit more pessimistic of our chances of finding an easy out. This, of course, is the gate that we would need to pass through to make it back down to civilization. Now, the trail started to become very overgrown, and I was becoming more and more concerned that we were going to end up dead-ending. Here I pass through a field of tent caterpillars, which is always pleasant. In the end, our efforts were rewarded, and we arrived at a excellent lookout. Now here we're overlooking the beautiful Fraser Valley out towards Abbotsford and Vancouver.
Yeah.
And as an interesting note, according to the GPS, the entire area to my left here was the United States. We were only 100 meters or so away from the border. So the question now was, were we going to make it back down to civilization without having to climb back up that hill? So you guys are going to have to stay tuned to part 2 to find out.